relevance is often tied to clearly stating what people need to know about, but sometimes that means finding corruption in government, finding corruption in business, and being able to report that. And that's a part of the First Amendment. It is the voice, actually, the true voice of broadcasters, unencumbered by outside forces. Well, there are a lot of stories that I could tell. I'll share one that happened in one of the two markets that I worked in. And this was probably a today kind of a story, given the strain and stress on financial revenues. There was a story that my news director came to me about a car dealer. And as the general manager, of course, of a station, you are the one of the key points of conversation regarding those types of stories. And I got the details on this particular car dealer and what they were doing wrong in this particular market. And I said to my news director, "That's great, let me get back to you. Your plans sound good, let me get back to you." I then, as the neutral zone, if I could refer to myself that way in the GM job, had my general sales manager come in, and I said, "I just want you to know, here's what our news department has found." And you can imagine, in a time when revenue was very important, which, by the way, when is it not? My sales manager went into the, "Oh my gosh, we are never going to make budget if we lose. That's a $2 million a year account. How can they do this? What's behind this really?" And I said, "Just pause for a second. Our news credibility is based in the ability to do this story, even if we lose money on it." And that was not an easy conversation for me to have with the sales manager, or I should say, it was not easy for him to accept, but he did. And after that conversation, I had the follow-up with the news director, and I said, "You got to go for that. We will potentially lose dollars, but this is a story that impacts our viewers. They need to know about it, so pursue with the same caution that you would use in any story that you pursue." And the news department did. They did a great job of covering the story, exposing something that should not have been happening. We did lose some revenue, but we move on. There are teachable moments, to use that phrase. We have sessions that we've done over the years that prepare the general manager for just that moment. Because as most people know, most of the folks who ascend to the general manager's office come through sales. In fact, the percentage is as high as 90% of general managers in radio and television come through the sales or sales marketing track. So they are conditioned, if you will, to go after the dollars, credibly, of course, always, but they are conditioned that way. And through sessions and different training opportunities, for them to be prepared with circumstances like the one I described is extremely important, because the reputation of a newsroom can be irreparably damaged with a wrong decision. Not to mention what it does inside the newsroom when the general manager doesn't appear to support a news-oriented, steeped in what they should be doing kind of a decision. You have to consider that stations today are getting their content and getting their input from a multitude of sources. There are people who look at blogs. There is the input from citizen journalists, a number of different sources for information that are coming into the newsroom that aren't the traditional filtered, or aren't the traditional well-tried and true sources of information. But that doesn't mean that that's a bad thing. A lot of times citizen journalists are on the scene, they find something that's happening right now, and they communicate it quickly. But stations and station management has to take the time to check to make sure that it is credible information that's coming in. Everybody's heard this saying, you know, we want to be first and all that, but you have to be right, of course. And in a time when a number of news organizations are staffed thinly, there has to be some checkpoint where someone can check to make sure these are in fact accurate statements or accurate pieces of information that are coming in. Journalists do take, and stations do take the time to get that right and to do that. But we have to constantly make sure that the new journalists coming in and the people in the news business understand the importance of that. And again, I think stations that take news seriously and take the First Amendment seriously do manage to get those training moments in to make sure that they have a system in place that does check that out before they just go to air. In colleges, we have a number of different initiatives that underscore that, whether it's our PSA contest where students across the country produce radio and television spots that express themselves in the whole First Amendment arena. And we provide scholarship monies that help to facilitate that. But we do a number of different initiatives and programs that do underscore the importance of the First Amendment. We have First Amendment posters and framed posters in schools across the country, journalism schools across the country, that was made possible by outreach by our board members to some of these universities to get that out. While we are going through an economic downturn, of course, I see the upside on the other side. The economy will turn around, advertisers will return, and our business will become even more financially successful than it is today. But even through the tough times, and maybe even more so during the tough times, we've got to be able to tell the stories that viewers, listeners, and readers of our website want to see and hear. And that ability to go after those stories, and sometimes those stories present themselves in a more pronounced fashion during difficult times. So we've got to be able to go after those stories and present them to our audiences in a relevant fashion, unfettered in the way that we cover them, to be successful, as I am sure will be. We look at the First Amendment and realize that it is the voice that we're able to give to issues. It is the voice that we're able to speak to our audiences. There is nothing more important than that when it comes to delivering news and delivering content of importance to our communities. And to be able to help defend that in the positions that I have and personally for future generations is extraordinarily important. We cannot underestimate the importance of the First Amendment.